Most fan bases circle the big games. Arkansas fans have to circle the entire calendar. It is one rough schedule, generally ranked the most difficult in the nation. So far, so good. Next up, Georgia. We got Ty Hudson on the line from Pig Trail Network to break down the Hogs and the Dogs for us in Athens. Hey, Ty, how you doing?
Yo, what's going on, Mark? How you doing, man?
Doing well. Enjoyed the game last week against Texas A&M, but I got to say I was a bit surprised at the control of the game. I thought it was going to be a really good game. I will be transparent in saying I picked Texas A&M to win, but that was one of those I kicked myself for not going with my gut. I took Arkansas on those points. I had no reservations there. Boom, I'm grabbing those 5.5 points, but I thought, man, they're going to win this game. Notre Dame, Wisconsin, same thing. I had my gut instinct, but I went with a favorite. Vegas swayed me, and then I was kicking myself because I thought I had the feeling Arkansas was going to win this game.
You should have picked the Hogs, Mark.
I should have picked the Hogs. Man, they had control of that thing on the line of scrimmage, the way Sam Pittman likes it.
I'll say this. I fully did not expect for Arkansas to dominate in the way that they did. They're kind of doing whatever they want in the first half. And I think a lot of that went to game planning. You know, we're just going to throw it. We're going to throw the ball. We know they're going to sell out to stop the run. So we're just going to chuck the ball through the air. And that's what they did. And they were really successful at it against a really good, pretty talented secondary. So I think the notion that Arkansas has no pass game kind of got, I don't know, it's kind of on its heels at the moment. I'm not saying they're going to do that every week, but they surprised me with how effectively they threw the ball and the deep ball too. I mean, it's just, they were just clicking on all cylinders. And what's funny is, they won 20-10. This could have easily been 34-10, 28-10. And KJ goes out in the second half. I think he missed the majority of the second half, and Malik Hornsby came in. You kind of see now why he's QB2. There was a lot of hoorah about, well, maybe he should be QB1. I don't have much faith in KJ. And look at him now. He's the only quarterback in the SEC right now with 800-plus passing yards and 200 rushing yards. So a lot of beliefs coming into the season are just being completely debunked. And at the beginning of the year, I did have A&M winning this. I did my preseason picks on the show, on the live show, and I had Arkansas at 8-4, but I had this as a coin flip loss. Now, obviously, week to week, as you like to talk about the sample size, it got larger and larger week to week, and I felt good about Texas going into that one. I felt like Arkansas clearly was the favorites, especially in Fayetteville. Texas walked into a hornet's nest, plus Arkansas is just a better program right now. And then I felt the same way about A&M. But A&M was getting healthier. They returned one of the best interior defensive linemen in the SEC and a guy that can clog up gaps and draw a lot of double team, a lot of double teams from offensive lines. So they were getting healthier on top of the fact that they passed the eye test and nobody was scoring on A&M. Nobody was throwing the ball. Yeah, people were having success on the ground, but a lot of that was because there were more attempts on the ground because the pass game was non-existent against their secondary. And they were banged up and they were injured and they had guys that were out. They're getting healthier. Linebacker play was improving based on what I had seen going into that game. So I was nervous. I did not expect Arkansas to come out and make it look so easy in that first half. And again, what was the score? 17. They put up 17 points. They feel like they probably left some points on the field with some questionable calls, especially, on third down and fourth down. But, yeah, it was clearly just a dominant performance by Arkansas in that first half.
Yeah, from the first play of the game, you could see the Hogs were ready to play, blowing Texas A&M off the ball, running at will, and the Aggies never recovered, even though on the scoreboard it was a 17-10 game going into the fourth quarter, and Arkansas put it away. So now going into Georgia, Treylon Burks and KJ Jefferson, the two most recognizable names on the roster, if not the two best players, their health is in question. Now, we never know health status reports of college football players, but what is the best we can tell at this point?
So Treylon Burks, on a it was supposed to be on a design receiver pass, right? He has the ball in his hands. He's going to throw the ball downfield. He doesn't see anything. He does the smart thing. He tucks the ball and he runs. Anyone else, that's probably a gain of a little bit. For someone like Burks, that's a gain of 15 yards, 14 yards. On the play, it looks to me like he's just getting stretched, like a defender was just trying to stretch him out. I don't know. I guess that's when the injury occurred. And so Sam Pittman has stated that he's sore. He was sore. I think he said on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it was, he was sore. With KJ, he suffered a bone injury of sorts. He's got a bone bruise, and it happened on a play when I think could have been a flag. It happened while he was half of his body was out of bounds, and he got a little bit of a, how they do the little push to, I don't know what the defender's expecting to get out of that, but they do it. And he ran into a bench, if I remember right. So he's got a bone bruise from that. Makes you wonder about the preparation this week. If he has, does it take away or slow down his ability to be mobile? Does it affect that part of his game? And I'm going to be real with you, Mark. If it does, you might have a little bit of an issue on your hands, because that is a huge part of this offense is KJ's ability to be mobile. And the way this veer and shoot RPO is designed, it's either running back keep or, you give the running back the ball. You throw it downfield off the play fake out of the RPO, or you take off and run. And that's been a huge part of this offense this year. Again, he's the only quarterback north of 800 passing, 200 rushing, and in the SEC. So that's a big deal. And if it forces you to alter what he does as a quarterback in this system, then I think what you see is probably something more like what we saw last year with Felipe Franks, where it was more about either you hand the ball off to the back or you throw it downfield. And while that was effective at times, it's not the way this veer and shoot's supposed to work. The quarterback has to be mobile. He has to be a threat in those three areas of the game. Being effective, either handing the ball off, reading the defense and making the decision whether or not you're going to keep it or hand the ball off, which he's done really well this year. Throw it or keep it. And like I said, the keeping part has been huge for Arkansas this year. And it's this offense, it's the way it's designed. It's all about the quarterback and his ability to make decisions in a really, in under a second. Like, you've got to be able to make the right reads. He's done that, but if you take away his ability to run or limit it in any way, it could make for a pretty long game against Georgia, especially as good as they are on defense.
And we'll get to that right now. Hey, folks, we got Ty Hudson on the line from Pig Trail Network to break down the Hogs' surprising 4-0 start, surprising to many across the nation, dominant over Texas and Texas A&M, so they pretty much own the state. And I know a lot of Texas people love to hear that.
Oh, boy.
We'll get the calls and in the comments coming in on that one, but that's okay.
That's right.
And, you got to prove it on the field. So now it's Georgia. And when I opened up the point spreads, I was expecting to see 8, not 18, 18.5, something in that range. Vegas knows what it's doing. I'm not going to question it. But 18.5 points between two of the top 5 to 10 teams in the nation, depending on your rankings. And that's the way it stays right now. Now, you're in the midst of prepping Georgia. I saw every play against Clemson. I saw some of the action against South Carolina. Didn't bother with UAB. Didn't bother with Vandy. That's your job, since you're the Arkansas guy, to try to sift through that Vandy game. 62-0, a complete annihilation. But I know that you've keyed on that Arkansas interior offensive line having to deal with that beast Jordan Davis and the rest of that Georgia crew.
Going to be tough. Oh, man. This might be – what's crazy is last year Georgia lost 9 to the draft, which was a school record. They had 9 players drafted, and that's their school record. This year, I don't know how many they're looking at right now. Too early to tell. What they do have – they have, like you mentioned, Jordan Davis, a 6'6", 340-pound monster. I mean, this is the Loch Ness monster you're about to go up with. I mean, this guy right now, according to the Sporting News, is the 25th overall, or he's projected in the top 25 in the first round. They have him going to the Bucks. He's got 2 sacks already on the year. And he's just a clogger, man. I mean, he fills up the interior line of scrimmage. Then you have and that was Jordan Davis. Sorry, I'm trying to read off my laptop here. Nakobe Dean, inside linebacker, about 6'1", 225 pounds. He's got a couple sacks on the year. He's projected somewhere in the top 20. It's somewhere in the first round. And then, of course, Adam Anderson, 6'5", 230-pound outside linebacker. But, boy, he can bring the pressure. He's got 3 sacks on the year. He's projected somewhere in the top 25 in the first round. They possibly have 3 first-round draft picks on defense alone. And we haven't even talked about JT Daniels, their quarterback, who at one point in time was considered maybe even a guy looking at being a Heisman. I know he's dealing with injuries too. Speaking of injuries, talking about the Arkansas quarterback, KJ Jefferson. But he was good to go last week and looked fine. But I think he's still dealing with that. But these guys on defense are playmakers. And again, I haven't, I'm as usual. I usually Thursdays when I do a lot of my video watching. Thursdays when I usually start really breaking down and watching these teams play. And if I'm lucky enough, I can do it a little bit early this week. That wasn't the case this week. I started watching Vanderbilt, and you were like, no, you need to check out the South Carolina game, which I knew in that game South Carolina had some gains. They did give up. They did have some deep balls down the field, so that makes you wonder. KJ has been really accurate beyond 20 yards this year. I think he's something like 70% beyond 20-yard throws, and that seems to be something that Georgia has struggled a little bit with. If there's any kink in their armor, maybe that's it. I don't know. They've got some good safeties too. I mean, there's just so much talent on this team, and it's primarily on their defense from what I can tell. And this is a really interesting matchup in a lot of different ways. I wish we weren't dealing with this bone injury or bone bruise that KJ has. I'd love to see him knowing that he's 100%. Maybe he is. And Sam Pittman also has a reputation for kind of, when he gives you an injury update, you just sometimes have to take it with a grain of salt, because you could tell it's clearly a tactic of his that he's either going to give you half the story, or sometimes you wonder if he's just making it up to mess with the media. I don't know. But there's no doubt KJ did. I mean, if you watch that video, it looked like he hurt his knee, and he was limping around the entire second half. So I don't think he was faking that, and maybe he's not still dealing with that injury. But I'd feel a lot better, I'll say that, if I knew that KJ and Treylon Burks were both 100%. But that's kind of a cloud that hangs over. For anyone who really, people who understand what this offense is all about, it's the KJ Jefferson show. Treylon Burks, as you mentioned earlier when we were talking, he's clearly a star. He's clearly a first-round talent. But this offense, it's all about quarterback play. So it's if they could find a kink, maybe that's it. Maybe KJ, who's got a great deep ball, his deep ball placement is wonderful. They've got the receivers to run fade and go routes downfield. Their underneath routes are there. And also, from what I have seen, I watched a video on a breakdown on Georgia's defense actually yesterday. I wish I could remember the name of the video, but he was talking about the check down throws were also a bit of something that Georgia kind of at times had struggled with. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that is the key. Maybe you don't get the run game going like you'd want. You just throw the ball. I don't know. This defense, though, they look like I don't know. They look like the best defense in the SEC, in my opinion, based on what I have seen so far.
Based on what I've seen through 4 weeks, I think that there are 6 or 7 defenses that I put on my list of defenses that I think are in that top 10 or 12, and Georgia's at the top of the list. I believe Georgia has the talent to be the best defense in the country, and I think they're playing like it. We have to wait till all the games are played. Alabama may have something to say about that, and Clemson, regardless of their offensive issues, their defense is still really good, so forth and so on. Yeah, all the guys that you just mentioned on the Georgia defense, there was a reason that in whether it be December or February during those signing days, they were the guys that at the top of the lists of the 5 stars. Okay, number 1 defensive tackle, number 2 defensive end, number 3 linebacker, outside linebacker. They all had those kind of reps coming out of high school. I got a couple other names for you. Nolan Smith was, I believe, arguably the #1 rated defensive player coming out of his class. He's third on the team in tackles. He's got 3.5 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks. Lewis Cine, and I know we talk secondary play a lot here because Arkansas has been so good in the secondary. That boy will lay some lumber. There's no question about that. He leads the team with 19 tackles, and he's just a hitter.
He sure did against Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw that hit. That was when I was looking him up. That was the first thing that came up, was that hit that he laid on Florida. I mean, he's abusive. I mean, he's more violent. He reminds me a little bit of Catalan, especially Catalan last year. Like Catalan just kind of laid people out. I mean, he was so physical, and he just this year it seems like he's playing a little bit more. I think the targeting calls are catching up to the defense for Arkansas. But that's Jordan Davis plays with that level, or not Jordan Davis, sorry. Scene plays with that level of physicality, ferociousness, whatever you want to call it. He's an abusive player.
And just to give you more on this, Ty, that's going to make you feel better, I say that in quotes, about this matchup. Georgia gets back 2 really good players in Tyke Smith, West Virginia transfer, who was second-team All-American last year, first-team All-Big 12 corner, who typically plays in the slot. They had missed him, and he's back. And also Darnell Washington, who, consider that Georgia's leading receiver right now is one Brock Bowers, who really people weren't talking about in Georgia circles too much, the diehards, obviously, but he a tight end out of California, the 3rd-rated tight end in the country in this 21 class. But since they had Eric Gilbert coming in as the 5-star LSU transfer, and they had this Darnell Washington, who was a 5-star, another one at tight end. Brock Bowers was kind of an afterthought for some people, at least as more of a development player, but he's now leading the team in receptions with 18, and he's been a find, 4 touchdowns. But they're getting Darnell Washington, their other 5-star tight end. He's going to be back this week.
Well, they're just loaded. And, of course, I do my breakdown on Friday, and it's like, the more research you do, the more you just kind of, oh my gosh, they have who coming back? This guy's healthy. Yeah, JT Daniels is dealing with some injury issues and what have you, but seems to be fine for the most part. But then you look at the backups' performance so far this year. Like, no one's really playing bad. I mean, even Stetson Bennett is 22 of 30 on the year, 443 yards, 73% pass completion ratio with six touchdowns to 2 picks with a quarterback rating right now of 250. Like, there's not really a lot going wrong for these guys. And we haven't even talked about the running backs. Like, they're chock full of talent. It's one of those situations where, and I know we're going to get someone, well, Texas had talent. Well, Texas A&M had talent. And that's true. But Georgia clearly, I mean, especially they played really great against, for the most part, played really great against Clemson. And Clemson, yeah, they're 2-2. And the more you go down that rabbit hole, sure, you can make the argument that maybe Clemson's not a top, maybe they're not even a top 25 team this year. But that is their best win this year, and their defense completely dominated. I think Georgia had 7 sacks in that game. But it's like everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing at Georgia. They're passing the eyeball test. They clearly play with a level of physicality that matches Arkansas, or maybe we should say that the other way around. Arkansas can match their physicality, but what I don't think they can match right now is the actual on-field talent. When you talk about how highly recruited these guys are, that's the area where it's a mismatch. There's no doubt about that. But Arkansas has, and I agree with those people who say that they have overcome that part of it. But then you got to deal with, this is a hornet's nest. You've got game days going to be in this game, or they're going to be down there. It's a big game, 93,000 people or something in that stadium, and they are diehards. Georgia loves their Bulldog fans are. I've heard they are absolutely similar to the Razorback fans. They're just rabid about their Bulldogs, especially with all the hype. There are a lot of people who believe they might be the best team in the country. So it's going to be a test for both these teams. It really is. But, yeah, the talent level, there's definitely a gap. On paper, there's a gap. But I will say, I think Arkansas, they have done a good job of outperforming teams with that kind of that talent level. But this is they certainly look the part. Georgia does so far this year.
And I typically play the role of bringing people to the middle of some of these arguments, because when it comes to recruiting, you get your people that just believe in the star rankings. That's all that matters. Look, they got all the 5 stars. They're going to win. They're the best. And then you got people that are like, I don't even look at that. That's stupid. And it's about development and coaching and all this other stuff. Well, it's about 2/3 of the latter. We've got our outliers. Texas is underachieving and USC is underachieving, et cetera. And then we've got our outliers. Wisconsin develops, top 35 classes into top 10 or 15 teams, et cetera, et cetera. But generally, Georgia's recruiting. Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia have brought in the best classes in America in the last 5 or 6 years, and they typically play like it, which brings me to the other portion of this, which is the coaching and the development, because you got to have that as well. Yep. And this is just astounding what Arkansas is doing right now. So there are a lot of young players that were recruited and signed by Sam Pittman, or I should say they were recruited probably by Chad Morris, and then Sam Pittman closed the deal and signed them. And we would have to go through the roster and the number of snaps played to determine how many of these players were signed by Sam Pittman. But collectively, most of the productivity is coming from Chad Morris's classes.
Yeah.
And they lost every game in the SEC. And they routinely lost to marginal group of 5 teams. Sam Pittman walks in. They're suddenly a capable team last year in the SEC. Forget the record. And now they've taken another leap forward. Like, what is that? I'm asking you, I know, the impossible question of what his secret sauce is, but this is a guy that's never been ahead. This wasn't Nick Saban or Urban Meyer walking into this situation. This was a guy that was an offensive line guru that takes over a program and never led a program in his life. And he does this.
He's changed the coaching search dynamic a little bit, hadn't he? I mean, when you think about it, like, yeah, okay, we could talk about, you go all the way back to Philip Fulmer at Tennessee. He was a former offensive lineman. He was an offensive line coach. I don't think he'd ever been a head coach, or maybe he was at a smaller school. I can't remember, but he goes to Tennessee, and look what he did at Tennessee. Maybe that's what he is. Maybe he's Arkansas's Philip Fulmer, not only because he was a former offensive line coach. You could look at Dabo Swinney at Clemson. I remember he was on the hot seat for a little while early on and turned it around. Some argue after he hired Chad Morris, who has now, he seems like all he does is burning everything he touches to the ground, including a winning high school football program down in Texas. But it's rare. It's rare. And what makes his situation even more unique is that, like you just mentioned, you're coming off of back-to-back winless seasons in the SEC, which had never been done before. I don't think in all of conference play for Arkansas in its history, or at least going back to when college football was actually relevant, like the 1960s. Like, that had never happened. Back-to-back seasons of winless conference records. So he comes over, and it's like, well, it's a dumpster fire program. Everybody said that this was a trash hire. I'm not going to lie. I'll admit it. I said from the get-go, I don't know about this. I don't know. What does Hunter Yurchek see in him? Is it because he coached here as an offensive line coach before he went to Georgia? Is it because these players loved him? And they did. They all came forward. In fact, several former offensive linemen took to Twitter and tweeted at Hunter Yurchek, said, hey, look, this is what we loved about Sam Pittman. You need to make him the guy. And I think Hog fans, some of them won't admit it, but a lot of them were also skeptical about the hire in the very beginning. And I said on my live show, it feels like an in-between kind of hire. Like, you hired him because it was safe, the money. It's not like you're throwing a whole lot of money at him. And maybe he's just going to rebuild the foundation in a similar way that Mike Anderson did with the basketball program. Of course, he was here for 10 years. Never could get past the second round of the NCAA tournament. That ultimately led him to getting terminated. But now you look what Musselman's doing with the basketball program now, because I think you have to give Mike Anderson some credit. He built a wonderful foundation. I thought that's what Pittman was going to be. No, it turns out he's not only is he rebuilding the foundation, but he's building a mansion on top of it. And it's impressive. It's been impressive to watch. I mean, for obvious reasons last year. And one of the reasons why I picked Arkansas to go 8-4 was because you've got how many seniors on this team? 23 seniors. I think 11 super seniors. They're one of the most experienced teams coming back. And, oh, by the way, maybe two of the best coordinators in college football if they're given positions. You're talking about Odom and Kendall Briles. And then they've also got talent. People act like it's only because of the coaching staff and because of the senior leadership. Yeah, those things are huge, but they've got some talent on this roster. And Chad Morris, I mean, he is responsible for a lot of the talent. KJ Jefferson was his guy. Treylon Burks was his guy. Jalen Catalon. Bumper Pool was already committed, but I think, he convinced Bumper Pool to stick around. But, technically we have to give him credit for Bumper Pool. I think Monteric Brown, was his guy. I can't remember if Brown was here a year, but a lot of the secondary, even some of the younger or older guys that are kind of in rotation, really most positions, those were his guys. A lot of them were. But, you look at A.J. Green, Raheem Sanders, Malik Hornsby. Those are all the guys that committed to Sam. So I don't know what the secret sauce is other than these kids just really love playing for Sam Pittman. Again, the former players talked about it, and I hadn't seen that kind of love. Like when you hear former players talk about him, it's like we love this guy. Like we love him, and he's a leader of men. That's what he is. And he said something interesting. I think it was on, I don't remember if it was Paul Feinbaum or where, but he talked about not like continuously shaming his players. He said, some guys just, I think what he was getting at was he doesn't coach out of fear. Like it's like the opposite of Bobby Petrino when he was here. Bobby Petrino scared the living daylights out of his players. I mean, they played for him. He got the most out of them. Houston Nutt was a rah kind of guy. He'd come into the locker room and rah, and there's only one Razorback, go Hogs, go Hogs. That's how he says Hogs. I've always found that interesting, but and entertaining at the same time. I loved Houston Nutt, but Sam Pittman is like this guy. He generally loves his players. They respect him. They love him. They want to play for him. They don't let go of the rope ever. I've not seen them. We could talk about Alabama and Florida last year, but I think that had more to do with the fact that COVID interrupted their offseason. They weren't able to develop the back end of their depth chart. Injuries and COVID completely caught up to these guys in the second half of the season, and they weren't the same team. But no one let go of the rope, and they play really hard for him. And I think, too, he's got something down with his routine through the week, the way they prep. And he's a CEO type head coach, right? I mean, in the same way that maybe Nick Saban, well, he is at Alabama. I think he's that kind of guy, that kind of head coach. Hopefully, if you do lose Odom and Kendall Briles, he'll be able to go out and grab someone that wants to coach this team, that wants to coach the offense and the defense, and want to get the most out of their players, like Kendall and Odom have done on offense and defense. But yeah, I don't really know what the secret sauce is other than these guys just want to play for their coach. And it's been really fun to watch. Again, I'll go back. Senior leadership matters. Super seniors are a big deal. But it's all those other things that matter. And Sam Pittman clearly knows how to get the most out of these kids. And he's doing exactly that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been fun to watch. Arkansas football relevant again. Big wins over Texas A&M. And, of course, they're going to face their biggest challenge to date with Georgia coming up in Athens this Saturday. Ty Hudson on the line from Pig Trail Network. You got to join him right there and join him after the ball game for his post-game show. What does that? How does that typically play out in regards to your post-game show? Are you on right after the ball game? And what can people expect with that?
Well, I started doing those like 2 years ago, I think, and they're crazy. The chat is wild, especially after wins, even after losses. I will say so far the basketball post-game chats were insane, but football has matched that this year. I mean, they love it, man. And it's really, it's just me kind of breaking down what we saw, kind of narrating what we just witnessed and trying to tell the story of what we just witnessed. And it's been a lot of fun doing those. And honestly, I love my Monday, Wednesday, Friday shows at 11 a.m., by the way, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But the post-game shows are my favorite thing that I do. And what's funny is it's literally gotten to the point where I eat typically with my neighbors, when we watch the game, we hang out, we watch the game together, we cook, we barbecue, whatever. We have a table that we turned into, or a fence that we turned into a table in our backyard. So we'll sit back there. We'll have our whole setup, barbecue and food and drinks and what have you. And then it's like, all right, 5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. Arkansas's clearly got this game won, or whatever the case may be. I've got to run in here, sit down, get everything. Hopefully I have everything set up and ready to go. But it's gotten to that point where I look forward to it that much. I don't ever want to miss a postgame show. And now I have sponsors. Now, like, I have to do those. I shouldn't say I have to, but I guess I feel a little bit obligated. Like, hey, those are going to be great views for my sponsors. And it's also giving my audience a little bit more of what we do on the PT, or what I do on the PTN. One man show. I do it all on my own. I don't have anyone help me set up. I don't have, I make all my own thumbnails. I do all my own stuff. I guess I'm a CEO of myself, of my channel, and there is no one else. There are no employees, but yeah, they're a lot of fun, and they get wild. Oh my gosh, that chat just gets wild, and it's a lot of fun. If anyone hasn't been there, even if you're not a Razorback fan, I mean, don't get me wrong. Don't go in there if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan slinging mud and expect for the chat to not, trample over you, but it's usually good fun. And a lot of them, I have pretty thick skin, and a lot of my chat has pretty thick skin, and it's just a lot of fun. It really is. I have a blast doing them.
Folks, that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 a.m. Central.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 11 a.m. Central
yep.
On Pig Trail Network with Ty, and then the postgame show, especially if you're an Arkansas fan. We've got Georgia postgame here at the Voice of College Football. So if you want to take that angle on it, but I encourage everybody to check out Ty's postgame show, and then again the live streams 11 a.m. Central Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All right, well, maybe Vegas knows what they're talking about, and maybe Georgia's going to be able to put on the throttle there in the second half and win by 3 scores. But I expect a good one, and hopefully that everybody's healthy and we can see the both teams at their best.
I don't even know. 18.5. When I saw that on Monday, my jaw kind of hit the floor. Like, wait, what? They do know this is 2 top 10 teams, but I've only seen highlights. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I've only watched highlights of their games. I'm only just now today on Thursday starting to watch like full games, and typically I only get about 1 full game in. Maybe I'll catch half of another. So I'm hoping to see exactly why Vegas, maybe they're going to know something we don't, and I'm curious to find out what exactly that is. But they are good. I do know one thing. They are really, really well coached. They're really physical. And they play great defense. I mean, they swarm to the ball. They mirror Arkansas in a lot of ways on defense, how they'll run multiple fronts. They're very timely on their blitzing, very similar to Barry Odom at Arkansas. So, they're good. There's no doubt in my mind. I would not at all question putting them at number 1 in the country. But again, I say that also, like, take that with a grain of salt, because I haven't watched. Clearly, there's a Bulldog fan or a Crimson Tide fan watching this going, well, hang on just a second. But I wouldn't have an issue with it based on what I know and what I've seen, and that includes Alabama as well. Like those, it does seem to me like it's Alabama, Georgia, and everybody else so far this year. I'm sure as we get a larger sample size as the year goes on, that that could change. It could change. Maybe the Clemson win and them absolutely smashing Vanderbilt. Maybe all that doesn't mean anything. I don't know, but I will say so far what I have seen, I'm kind of bought into the idea that they are absolutely a top 2 team in the country.
Ty, I believe you can see the banners that I post. So the banners we post, I believe you can see the banners. But we're going to start. I'm going to start throwing up banners like this and have people scratching their heads or going insane or whatever, because I'm going to start to use my rankings. So that's what we're going to identify. So that's what we've got right now. We got number 1 Arkansas at number 3 Georgia. It's your rankings guide right there.
Now, I mean, okay, all right. I'm not. Hey, all right, I'll take it. And by the way, you're not the only one to do that. And I don't want to. I'm not here to promote other channels. I don't want to do that because I
That's fine.
I love being on this show and have a lot of respect for what you do. But there are other people that have done that as well. They have, and they I think what that shows is that there's a lot of flaw in the AP top 25. There's a lot of flaws. There's a lot of things, and I think the way that some other people are doing it, it's very similar to yours. There's some really valid points with the way that you guys are doing that, and I don't know that I would put them at number one, but based on who they've played, I mean, it's kind of hard to argue.
That's all I base it on.
Yeah, I know.
All I'm basing it on is results and performance.
Yep.
Now, had they made the same results, 4-0 versus the same schedule, the same opponents, but let's say they beat Rice on a last-second field goal, and they beat Georgia Southern on a last-second field goal. Well, they wouldn't be number one in my rankings because it's not just based on the results; it's also the performance. So a 50-0 win is given much more weight than a 28-27 win against the same opponent. So it's both the Arkansas wins against those four opponents, and typically, obviously, the focus is on Texas and Texas A&M, but also the level of dominance in those games.
Yeah. Well, your AP's or I should say your AP. Your poll's going to be interesting next week. It really is. Like, I'm curious to see how that lines out. Because there are some, oh my God, the games this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be some shakeups in your poll, in the AP, in the coaches. There's going to be some shakeups, and maybe it is Georgia. I don't know. I don't know about the spread.
There's always a big shakeup in my rankings.
That's true,
because I reevaluate everyone every week. So, for example, if Oklahoma's an AP number 3 team in the country, and they're consistently struggling against West Virginia and Tulane and Nebraska, well, they're not number 3 for me. They just got into my rankings this week at number 18.
And they shouldn't have beat West Virginia at home. I watched that game. West Virginia shot themselves in the foot repeatedly. They looked like the better team in Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah. I mean, so what drives me crazy with that, Ty, is that Oklahoma is a preseason number 3 or 4 team. Yeah. So that's the perception, but they continue to play like a top 30 or 40 team, and they just get nudged down a little bit. Let's just nudge them down. I evaluate based on what we've seen. You obviously have to make assumptions starting in week 1, of course. There have to be assumptions made. But the assumptions become less and less as there's more data points.
So the AP, and I'll tell you another flaw. I don't know, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know where you have these guys. Cincinnati, who's played 3 games, they're ahead of Notre Dame, they're ahead of Arkansas, they're ahead of. I mean, I don't understand it. Where do you have Cincinnati?
I believe I've got Cincinnati at 12.
At 12. I don't know. I don't know how you have them ahead of teams like Arkansas, which is 3 games played, especially given who they've beaten. And granted, one of those was at home, but I mean, they throttled Texas, who, by the way, is racking up, 50 points a game now since that game. And A&M, who's an SEC opponent, who, I mean, you and I agree they weren't top 10, but I think they should probably be ahead. I feel like they should be at least in front of Cincinnati or maybe right behind, but still, I don't think they belong. I don't think Cincinnati has any business in the top 10. I don't know. I just don't. I want to see. I'd wish they'd played a 4th game, but of course, that's their bye week. It is what it is, but I don't know how you have a team 3-0 in the AP and have them ranked ahead of someone like Arkansas. And I know that sounds biased because obviously I cover the Hogs and I am a fan of the Razorbacks, but I don't know. I think it's another flaw in the AP.
I'll only bring up 2 other scenarios. We had a situation in the AP poll 2 weeks ago where I'll leave out the team names and I'll fill them in after the scenario. Team A beat Team B by 3 scores. Team B beat Team C by 3 scores, and Team C was ranked higher than Team A, and that Team C was 2-1, and Team A was 3-0. So they not only had a better record, but they had that 3-score win over a 3-score win, and USC, Team C, was still ranked ahead of Kansas State, 3-0. even though Kansas State beat Stanford by 3 scores and Stanford beat USC by 3 scores, they're ranking USC above Kansas State, a 2-1 USC above a 3-0 Kansas State.
I know every time you and I, when we do these, when you and I come to, we're gonna complain about the AP Top 25, and I feel that that's appropriate because I don't feel like I do it enough on my show. Like because I focus primarily on just the Razorbacks and the SEC. But yeah, I've had my share of griping and moaning about the AP Top 25. I hate preseason polls. I think if they're going to do them, and I said this here last time, I think I would wait till after week 4 to rank anybody. But they gotta sell their clicks. They gotta have clickbait. They gotta have something that's worth writing about. And I get it, but I don't know. It kind of screws everything up. I don't think we ought to know anything about anybody we don't know anything about anybody until after week 4. And even then, like,
we don't.
What do we know about? I mean, truly, what do we know about Texas A&M? To me, that is like the biggest question mark in the top 25. Not only have they not played anybody, the one team they did play at a neutral site could have beaten them by 4 scores. What do we know about A&M really? I think they're a quality AP top 25. I don't know really. I like the format of who have you played. Let's go on that. And yeah, it'll change. Like you said, you're going to have pretty big shakeups every week. And I think that's the way it should be. That we should look at the body of work, who they played, and go based on that instead of just, and I get to an extent, like would Arkansas beat Alabama? That's going to be the question. You have Arkansas at 1. Are they a better football team than Alabama? And I don't think so. But we only know based on what we've seen. So that's why I think your way of doing it and some other YouTubers that or other content creators that follow college football the way they do it, which is similar to your format, to me it makes as much sense, if not more, than the AP. But we could go on and on, kind of like the last time you and I talked about targeting. We went on another, I don't know how long about that. So
yeah. And I'll just make one more point just to clarify for anybody that's going to check out my rankings or is going to comment to this video based on me ranking Arkansas number 1. In no such way does that mean I believe Arkansas is the best team in the country. So I don't believe that they would beat Alabama. They're, of course, going to play. But if Arkansas continues to win, they will hold that number 1 ranking, I would think, because of their schedule. How are they going to lose a ranking of number 1 against that schedule? And Alabama's number 2 in my rankings right now. So I don't try to, I'm not making predictions, and I'm not saying they would beat them and they would beat them, right. Just basing it on a resume.
Paul Feinbaum this morning said something that was honestly pretty powerful when you consider who he is. He came on Josh Bernicini's show here in Arkansas, 921 The Ticket, and he said, if Arkansas beats Georgia, I'm putting them at number 1. He didn't mention Alabama, Ole Miss. He didn't talk about that. Now, to be fair, I was taking my kids to school, so I only caught, maybe he did mention Alabama before that. I don't know, or maybe shortly after. But in the way Bernicini put it on Twitter, that's all he mentioned. If Arkansas goes on the road and beats Georgia, I'm ranking them number 1 in the country, and I think that's appropriate. And I had yesterday in my show, yesterday morning, Ty, will they be ranked number 1 if they beat Georgia? My response was no, of course not. Alabama, it doesn't matter. Alabama, as long as they beat Ole Miss, they're going to be given the benefit of the doubt. And I have a hard time having a problem with that. But I see from your point of view where it's like, but Arkansas has clearly played the more difficult schedule. Yeah, they played Miami earlier. What is it? What is Miami's record now? 2-2?
Yes.
Or something. So
could have lost to App State.
Yeah. So your structure or your format would make more sense to have Arkansas at number 1. Again, if you want to do Team A, Team B, Team C, Team D, here's what they've played against or whatever. And you look at Arkansas, who at that point now has played 3 top 25 teams at the time, smoked one of them, should have beaten the second one by 3 scores, and then went on the road and beat. Again, that was a top 8 team, and then they go on the road and they beat the number 2 team, even if it's by a field goal or a point. You would clearly, I think most people, not knowing who that team is, would have them ranked number 1 in the country given the body of work. Makes the most sense to me. But then you have the other side, like you said and kind of clarified. Yeah, would Arkansas beat Alabama? Right now, I would say no. But it's all based on your body of work and what you've accomplished so far, or what you haven't accomplished so far. So again, I like that. I like that idea. But Paul Feinbaum saying that I thought was pretty explosive, because I did not expect him to say that. I really didn't. And he kind of has a reputation for being a quote unquote Alabama homer, even though he's a Tennessee alum. I don't think that's the case. I think he just talks about Alabama the most because that's what the network wants him to talk the most about, and they win. I mean, you know about that life, you know more than most about like what matters, who do you talk about? Are you going to talk about the 3-7 Razorbacks, or are you going to talk about, the undefeated number 1 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide? So, but I thought that was pretty interesting to hear him say that this morning. I don't think it happens. I think the AP, if Arkansas were to upset Georgia, and that's a big if, and Alabama manages to hold off Ole Miss, I think they still give it to Alabama to be number 1. So,
Ty Hudson, Pig Trail Network. Join him again Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 a.m. Central Time, and for post-game of the Hogs taking on Georgia this week. Wow, this was not one of the games of the year, one of those quote-unquote games of the year when the schedule was released, but it sure is now. Should be interesting. Right, Ty? We always appreciate the conversation, man.
Always, man. It's a blast. I appreciate it, Mark.